All right, now it's time to dive into some complex mechanics. I've opened a file that already has a run cycle in here. You are probably looking at this going, oh, I don't have that in my file just yet. You don't have to have the run cycle necessarily to do what I'm about to do. So I'll show you the setup for this file, and then I'll show you how you can modify it since you won't have the exact same file. So my file is, we have a run cycle, then this gap, and then the run cycle again. Now, in our case, if you are starting from just a T-pose character with whatever rig you're using, you can see I've also changed characters. Whatever you're using for your character is probably going to work just as well as what I've got here. But if you are going to try and follow along, then what I would recommend is instead of having a whole run cycle, just for this first pose, just have the character in a squat ready position, because that's more or less what this pose is here, but you'll probably have 2 feet on the ground. On the landing, instead of going into a run position, you'll have your character land and stand there. So you'll change the first and last pose, but you don't have to start off by doing that. Just do the first pose. Don't worry about the last stuff until the end. In my case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to implement a complex dive roll. We have this run. Let's have the character dive over a box. So I'm going to go ahead and make a cube, bring that in just like that. And my character is going to come, run, and dive over that object. Right off the bat, I'm going to make sure I take these ground elements and put them in a display layer. Layers create from selected. Set them to reference so I can't grab them. And we're set to go. I have the character already moving. There's already a run cycle. And so I'm going to put all this animation and layer it in, considering what's already there. So I'm going to have my character. I'll grab the hips. He's here. He's down. He comes up. Somewhere around here, I'm going to have him step down onto that other foot. And just for kicks, I'll do a couple of different things at once. I'll say the hip is down, the foot is also down. I don't have to never touch the foot. I'm only touching the hips right now. It's my shot. I can do what I want to do. And so I can say, all right, and I'm going to scrub through. How's this looking? He comes in here. He takes another step. I do want to make sure that whatever I had with this back foot, I don't want that back foot sliding around. He's lost all of his weight. He's just slipping. And so what I want to have happen is frame 50 is where that foot, the front foot, plants. So I'll use that trick from before. With this back foot selected, I'll right click and say copy, go to frame 50, right click, paste. Gets a little stretched out. I have various controls to do a foot roll. Your rig is going to have a completely different setup. Every rig is different. Usually it's some kind of foot control. There's something over here in the channel box called foot roll, and you can just move that slider. In this case, with this particular rig, it's a little ball underneath the ball of the foot. Sometimes it's this little spinny orb inside as well, and you can see that it's kind of adjusting where the toes and the feet are. Usually what you don't want to do is just like rotate the foot and move it. There's usually something to help you not have to do that. It's impossible to know what rig everybody's using, and all the rigs you'll use throughout your career are different, but usually you're looking for some kind of foot roll control. And what I'll do is say, all right, well, you know what? That's a little bit more stretched than I wanted. Let me tone this down. Let me pull him back. And that's going to actually inform where this front foot is going to go. So maybe I just decide, you know what? I was going to go further, maybe not quite that far. I'll go there. That might be more reasonable. Go ahead and grab that little foot roll control again, fix that. And so now I have the character come in here. He takes a step. Still looks a little bit weird. It's fine. We're not looking for perfection. We're just looking for the rough idea. And then after he steps down, whoosh, somewhere around here, he's up in the air, he's sideways, jump. For example, if I were just keeping him upright, he could just jump and then land back in this running position. But if I'm going for something more complex, I want to have him do a dive roll. I want him to dive forward over the box. In fact, I'm going to move this keyframe. I'm going to shift click it and drag it. I'm going to go like this. So he goes, whee. Seems a little fast, but whatever. There, and then down, smack his head into the floor. I'll select it, copy it, come over here, right click, paste, just to get the same pose. And then I'll say, all right, well, I want him to do a roll. So I'll align him as best I can to make this part easy. He was here, now he's over here, and he does a roll. Maybe I'll put him like this and he'll be sitting on his butt. I'm just kind of layering in the base of the action. The only thing that's really happening is right here at the end. He's like really spinning. If you are doing a character flipping, think about a clock for a second. You've got the 12 hand on top, which represents midnight, but it also represents noon. 12 noon and 12 midnight are the same pose on the clock, but they represent two different times. When you rotate 360 degrees on a clock, you're technically at a different value, 12 noon, 12 midnight, but the pose is the same. Rotation values in 3D are the exact same way. I take my character from 12 noon, I spin him around to 12 midnight. However, the original pose that I had right here was still at noon. It wasn't rotated. And so what ends up happening is he spins 360 degrees, and then he unspins 360 degrees. If I go to the graph editor, you'll see what I mean. If I take his rotation values, and we take a look just at those three things, you can see that one of the axes, the green one in particular, goes down to a value of negative 353, basically 360 degrees, right? The full spin. If I go like this, you can see that it's actually calculating a sideways math, but then we also have this one. It's a weird combination of X, Y, and Z that's causing it. Like you would think like, oh, I thought it was forward and back. When you're doing a complex action like a flip, you have your character do a full rotation. All you need to do when you have a flip is you select the rotation channels, you go to Curves, Euler Filter. Whoop. And immediately you can see it changed it. What it did was it normalized 12 noon and 12 midnight, and it made them connect to each other so that it doesn't spin 360 degrees and then unspin. It does the math and then stays there. And so if I now just kind of fix the rotation values, you can see that it's actually now using the red one, translate X, which is the one that we thought it should use, the one that goes back and forth. He's no longer spinning this way. And so now he does his little spin, but it behaves as expected. And so that is a really, really handy little thing that you're gonna wanna know for more advanced animations. Grab all your controls, come back in here, set your graph editor to this button right here, step tangents. Now, I can go through with the period and comma buttons. I can step through those individual poses rather than hitting play. So if I hit play, it doesn't look like anything happened because I think I missed. Oh, I only have the rotation channels activated. Let me try that again. Select everything and make sure that I actually grab everything. There we go. So now, if I hit play, it only plays the poses that we've isolated, that we've actually keyed. Now, a few other things as we're beginning to kind of block this out. We're still in the blocking phase, and one of the key differences of a layered workflow is I never set anything to stepped. We absolutely can set it to stepped and layer stuff in with our hips and our arms and so on in stepped poses, so no interpolation, just kind of teleporting from pose to pose from what we set. But a very common way to work in layered is just to leave it interpolating, and we're using the motion to figure out the motion. One of the things I'd recommend checking out is a downloadable link I have on this video, the shot planning workflow, and on it is a nice little list of things to look out for. One of those things is contact poses, wherever you have a contact and release frame. So here we have the feet coming into contact, and then we have the feet leaving at some point, presumably, and we kind of skip that whole section. Here he hits both of his feet down on the ground. We'll go ahead and just key the whole body on frame 49. I'll delete frame 50. So we have frame 49 right there. And then here he's up in the air. I'm going to kind of do a hybrid thing here, and I'm going to just bring his feet to be a little bit more useful. Go like that. Go like that. So I'll key his feet. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to layer in kind of a mixed thing here where I want to have the character getting ready to jump or beginning his jump with one foot kind of up in the air like that, and the other foot still here on the ground. I'll keep the whole character just to make sure I have keys on things, and I'll tilt this foot up. So I'll go like that. And now if I look at it, he steps, he jumps, he leaps. Now, once again, the interpolation's back. The reason that will keep happening to you is because in the animation preferences that we set at the very beginning, under the animation menu, it says the default tangents are auto ease. So every time I adjust, I set keys and things like that, it creates new keys. It creates default tangent handles that have easing turned on. So if you want to change that because that is just more comfortable for you, you won't find it in the default in tangent. It's not here. You'll find it in default out tangent. It'll go out as stepped. Using the stepped workflow, boom, boom, and then the jump right there. It's still kind of using the ideas of pose to pose, but I'm not worried about the entire body's pose. I'm just working on the hips and the feet. And so now, if I hit play, it's starting to come together. My recommendation is every time you want to pose the arms, try to do it channel by channel. If I go to the top right corner of Maya and I hit this little 3-tiered icon with the hammer next to it, boop, it pulls up the tool settings. Inside of Maya, when I hit Q, W, E, R, my transformation hotkeys, which are also the little tools over here on the left, if I'm in rotation mode, you can see my settings for rotation mode. I'm by default set to object mode. If I switch this down to gimbal mode, most animators, especially newer animators to Maya, don't like working in this mode because I can't just spin the orb. It won't let me do it. But this is the most accurate to just 3D rotations. When I move these, what you see is exactly what you get between this rotation orb and the graph editor. So if I change this green one, the green one moves. If I change this red one, the red one moves. If I change the blue one, you get the idea. And ultimately, I'm just gonna start adding stuff. So I'm gonna clean this up a little bit, and in the next lesson, I'm gonna show you how to actually start refining some of the actions as we go. Meet the ball. This character is a stand-in for the character we've been working with so far. Now, when it comes to these complex animations, there's a lot of controls. There's a lot of body parts. There's a lot of just stuff happening at once. And as you saw from the last lesson, it can be a lot to look at. And just to see all this stuff moving around can be very distracting. Sometimes it can be easier to just do what I call geometry blocking, where you take a piece of geometry and you have it do the action instead. So here, I've actually animated just the up and the down and the rotation of a sphere. This gives the rough idea of what's supposed to be happening. Now, on the top, I don't know if I pointed this out before, this is my actual camera view. If I go like this, it's like my camera. Right there, you can see that I actually have my camera following the character. So from the perspective of the camera that matters, it stays kind of in the same screen space. From the bottom, we can see the normal world. And so I've animated the sphere just kind of doing its thing. This becomes a really helpful base to figure out the timing and the energy of the shot that you're trying to animate. I would recommend doing this for a lot of complex actions. You'll see this in the behind the scenes of lots of movies, short films, even games, because animating one object moving around at a certain speed is much less overwhelming than having the whole character with all the different controls where you're tempted and distracted to start posing everything. So if I look at the animation on the ball itself, this is what I've got. I've got my translate Y, the up and down, the jump, the fall, the roll. If I go to the rotate X, that is the roll. So you can see it has this lean forward as it pushes forward. It goes into this rotation. It does, you can see that this would edit it. It kind of stagnates a little bit, flattens out because it has hang time. It's not really rotating while it just does this little bit of a dive. And then it dips forward. We get to this. It doesn't move at all for this frame. And then suddenly, whoosh, it does the whole thing. And we go from a value of like 173 to 370. So it does a whole spin. The numbers are not important. The point is, the information's here, the data is there. I can use that if I want. There was a reason I showed you all that copy pasting stuff. Because if you really like what you've got here, you can use it as a base. I can take this translate Y, select it, and I can paste it onto the root of the character. I can use the rotation values and use that as a starting point. You probably will still need to change it, but it can give you a good idea of what your curves might look like if you're using the graph editor. If nothing else, and you ignore the graph editor entirely, it gives you something to shoot for when you're posing in the viewport. At the very least, it's just a helpful tool. So I'll go ahead and just hide it now. Now, With my character, I've gone ahead and I've cleaned up a few of these poses. I still have stuff like, for example, this back leg is just kind of stuck in space. You can see I only have a couple of keys on it. I have a key here, there, and then that one, I don't know why it's keyed, but it's just kind of in the wrong spot. I should probably fix that. And then here, it's at this pose. And then eventually, nothing happens. So at the moment, I've used the sphere as kind of to show what I might do. So I actually went and deleted everything after the dive roll, just to show that this can be a good starting point. So I'm going to go ahead and keep adding poses. All right, a little bit of time has passed and I have added even some more stuff. It's not done yet, and you can see he kind of freaks out right here at the end, but we have the run, he does the little hop, it follows the sphere almost exactly, and then eventually does the dive. We have that pose from before, and I've added a little bit more to have him extend his arms and spin. He ends up on his butt like we had earlier, and then eventually he kind of freaks out right there. He just like totally breaks. And that's just the gimbal rotation again, because I have undid what I did earlier. If I go ahead and just grab all these controls, go to the graph editor, go to rotation channels, what I can do is just grab all these curves, Euler filter, and you can see it fixed that frame right off the bat. And so the main idea here is using that geometry blocking workflow or that technique as a way to build out what one of our layers might do, what our hips should look like. And the goal of that is to animate the energy of the shot. Now, after adding some more work and fixing the Euler filter, this is what I've got. It's starting to feel pretty good. And all I've done to get to this point is by using the hips, and if I look at the curve, I don't have a ton of keyframes. I mean, there are several, but it's not like every single pose. If I step through it, you can see that I did spend quite a bit of time kind of figuring out the beginning. His feet kind of just float off the ground, so not everything is perfect yet, but I have the overall idea of the roll. I haven't put a lot of time into the weight, but I wanted to make sure that when he came down on his hands and he kind of supports his weight, his arms bend quite a bit. Let me go ahead and zoom in here so you can see it better. And I wanted him to land on his kind of upper shoulders with his hips elevated, then his hips are on the ground. He gets a foot down under him. I'm looking for those contact poses. And then he puts the other foot down underneath him as well. And I kind of move his hands down. Now the hands right now are really rough. They're still in FK, which means they just kind of rotate. They don't actually lock onto anything. I should switch them to IK if I want to have him actually plant his hands, which is why right now they just kind of wiggle around. They don't actually stay on the floor the way his feet do. Like his feet lock onto the floor because they're set to IK. But for the moment, that's okay, right? I'm doing it in passes. So at the moment, I've used that sphere workflow just to get the energy of the shot, the timing, the spacing, the overall feeling of this kind of dive, hang time, roll. Like if I'm watching it and it's just like hard to tell, one of the other tips you can use in this situation is if your rig allows, you can also turn off things like the arms, the head, the legs. If they're really distracting you, you might be able to just turn them off. Some rigs have that feature, some rigs don't. So as we're working on this and I want to keep adding stuff, I'm just going to say, pick a target. What do you want to look at? What do you want to stare at? Because everything needs a little bit of work, so we can really look anywhere. If I want to grab the hips and focus on that, is there anything with the hips that I want to do? I could maybe adjust the down position. I could add a little bit more compression here. As he starts to lean forward, his feet kind of come off the ground a little bit earlier. Maybe I could take his feet and grab both of those. This pose, they're both on the floor. Here, they're up in the air. I'm just going to say, you know what? I don't want his feet to come up just yet. So I'm going to just shift click this, and I'm going to move this key over. So it stays there for another frame. And then they come off the ground. It's a little bit better. We have a hyperextension on this foot, which means I should do something about that. I'll maybe grab the little foot rotator inside there and just do that so his knee stays a little bit bent. And then maybe this back foot, I'll do it a little bit less. Just tweaking, just adjusting. But now what I've got is he stays like that. Now his legs actually straighten out all the way before he pops into the air. And I'll go ahead on this next frame. Let's see, I'll key it on 58, make sure I don't change anything. On 59, I'll point it down a little bit and move it up so we have a little bit of bend. I don't want hyperextension. Hyperextension is when the leg is pulled so far away that we have no control over the knee. You don't want that. You want to make sure that at the very least, you're back in range enough that the knee will engage right there, right there. It doesn't have to be bent. It just can't be like disconnected. So that's bad. That's fine. So I can keep it looking very straight without having it, hyperextended. And so that is a quick little change to the feet that now helps that jump feel a little bit better, where it actually pushes up against the ground. The back foot isn't really helping with that. The back foot is totally flat. And so I'm going to go ahead and key that on frame 0 here. On this frame, I'll rotate it. There we go. On this frame, like that. I don't know why this toe is all bent. Maybe I'll back this up a little bit. Like that, and there. And since that foot was not as helpful in the frame before, like this foot towards camera is very straight, this one in the back is not quite as helpful. I'm going to say that that one in the back is still a little bit closer to the ground because it released a little bit later. Just like that. And so that's kind of the process here, is just to pick a target, pick an object, and start adjusting it, tweaking it, and just improving it over time. Now, Maya gives us some tools to help with this process, but before we dive into those in the next lesson, what I'd like you to practice, go ahead and add a sphere or a cube. I think a cube is usually better if you need rotation values. I did the sphere and then made it an oval so you could still see the rotation. That's fine too. But take a piece of geometry, just a regular primitive, and animate that object doing whatever the action is that you're trying to animate. It'll still have all the difficulty of figuring out the timing and the spacing, but once you have that done, you can use it to help inform your complex character choices. So take a minute, do that, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Right now we have the run, the jump, the dive, and then right here, the character puts their hands on the ground and then nothing. There's no keyframe data. And so we just have interpolation over to here, where the character resumes their run. And so in between, the character runs, jumps, rolls, and then just floats into the next pose. There's no mechanics, there's no motion. And if we look at it in screen space, you can see that the character just glides along the floor. Not great. We have some stuff to do. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the hips. I'm going to pull up the graph editor, and I'm also going to reduce how many frames I'm staring at. And I'm just going to jump over here to 88, which is the frame where the character is on the ground. And we'll end it around 111-ish. And actually, maybe I'll get a couple extra frames just so I can see kind of where we're coming from. There, so I can see the momentum that we're entering this pose with, then nothing, and then the ending. Because we have an A pose and a B pose, like the character has somewhere to go, it makes it a little bit easier to know what direction the character is going in, what the translate Z is going to look like in this situation, because the character is just kind of moving forward. There's not a whole lot I have to do here. If you were starting from scratch, I would have no keyframe data on the back end. I guess I would have all these keys to deal with, like that. I would end up in this situation where I'm at frame 88, or in this pose, and then there's nothing. So if I were coming from nothing, I'd probably start with moving the character forward and up to their standing position, which is pretty much where I'm going to leave it. So if I undo that deletion, I've got my keyframes back. That's pretty much what I've got here. So I've just got the character moving forward and up and back into a standing position, and that's good enough for now. Now to get to that spot, I'm going to grab the hips, or the main mover, the cog, center of gravity, and I'm just going to focus on the up and the down and the forward and the back. I want to have the character jump up into the air and then come down into this step right here where they'll continue to run. I'm just going to focus on the down and the up for a second. And I'm going to push the character. I'll just use translate Y. I will set a key in my graph editor. And I'll just push this down to keep the character lower. I'm also going to set these to auto so that they aren't making creative decisions for me. I don't want those splines doing their own thing. So keep the character kind of low. I'll also maybe keep the character back a little bit so that they kind of have to work their way out and then they'll accelerate as they move. And from here, the other thing I want to do, right, I'll use 94 just for fun. I'm just picking a frame at random of what I feel like timing-wise I want to use. And I think I'm going to establish the feet locking in place. It's very distracting having them sliding all over the place. So I'm going to say whichever foot is the front one, which is going to be this one over here, the character's left foot, the blue one. That foot pose, since it's the farthest forward foot, it's most likely going to still be there on frame 94. This other foot that's in the back is probably going to have to come off the ground by that point, so I don't know what it's going to do just yet. But I can guess that this one here might still reach. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my keyframe data from here, copy, paste it, so that that foot does not move. Put it over here. I want to keep it planted in that position. Now it doesn't have to stay in that exact pose. I'm going to come in here, grab the tilt up control, like the foot roll, and let that foot kind of roll forward. But that way I can have the character getting ready to jump. And maybe what I'll do is I'll use this in kind of a hybrid approach, and I'll start thinking about the pose that I might want to have happen here. So I'll have the character kind of come forward like that. And then I'm going to take this other foot as well, and I'm going to say, all right, it was here. How long can I keep it there? This is a trick that I use a lot for this kind of stuff, where I'll take the back foot, I'll find wherever that keyframe is, where it's locked on the floor, I'll copy, and I'll just paste that keyframe here. Now I just jumped arbitrarily into the future and dropped a keyframe. Clearly that foot can't still have a value of whatever this keyframe data suggests, because the foot does not reach, right? It doesn't work. So rather than reposition it and try to figure out, okay, well, where should the foot be on this frame? I don't know yet. But what I do know is that it's going to stay there for some amount of time, but how long do I let it lock there? Well, it works here on frame 91. Frame 92, questionable. Let's start there. So I'll take this keyframe that I duplicated, I'll move it back to 92, and we'll just see if I can make it work. If on 92 I roll the foot a little bit further, it's almost there. I could maybe adjust the hips if I want to kind of get that knee to re-engage. I could try to push the foot more bent up, or I could just manually create a bend in the knee if I really need to, depending on the rig. In this case, I'm going to say, you know what? Let's go ahead and take the translate Z, and I'm going to pull it back just a little bit to keep it there for that frame. And so here, I'll just keep that foot in position until wherever it feels like it needs to come away. And so I think I'm at about 92. I'll adjust the hips a little bit just to pull them back. I'm also going to remember that the hips themselves might need to rotate a little bit. So I could use various controls and different things. But one of the main points of layered is not to get too in the weeds of getting the specific poses, the specific controls, and getting everything perfect. I'm just trying to layer in the general idea. And so for me, I think that is a decent enough spot for that to go. Then I've got my foot, and I'm going to go ahead and just say it's somewhere up in the air. Where? I don't know. I won't worry about it yet. So the foot comes up, goes like that. Eventually, it is that right foot that's going to land on the floor. So I'm going to say that at some point, whatever this keyframe is, I'm going to do the same thing in reverse. That is where that foot lands. So at some point around here, I'll try to put that foot there. I'll reposition it. And then I will put the foot in a stepping position, maybe like that. Now I have a roll control and a foot control. Both of these are relevant. This keyframe is important. This is my contact pose. It might not be on the right frame though. That's very stretched out. So I'm just going to take this, move a frame forward, move a frame forward. That looks like it might be right, because here it looks like we're standing on the foot. So I'm going to say, yeah, 104. We'll use this. I'll adjust this to look a little bit better. And maybe I'll back it up a tiny bit so that knee re-engages. Cool. Now as of frame 105, I'm just going to say copy, paste the down position, once again of the foot, and I'm going to make sure that this is not rotated. So this is I think 360. It's not 0 because the character did a whole front flip, which means the foot has over-rotated 360. But I do know I want translate Y on the floor. I don't think I want the toes tilted up either. Go ahead and key that there. And what I can do here is I can start to introduce the jump. So I'll just go somewhere in the middle here to get my jump. I'll just go in the middle, frame 100. Sure, we can always move the key and just up you go. I don't know how high to go necessarily. I can compare to the rest of my character's movement. I'll just go a little higher than usual. Set that to auto. Now the character will come up this way. Smooth those out. Jump and down, jump and down. And then I'll just kind of go back and forth between the feet, the hips, and any of the main things that move most of the character's body. I'm not going to worry about things like the arms or the head just yet. So I have pretty much just kept going with what we were doing. I've exaggerated things a little bit more, just added more details. When it plays, it looks like this. And it's exactly what we were just doing, just with a little bit more refinement. And so if I now look at the finished curve of the body, you can see that we pretty much have the same curve here. The hips stay down for a little bit, they shoot up into the air, we get our hang time, and then it drops down and dips into a slightly bigger down pose, and then back into the run. Now, the arc of the hands is still not perfect. We definitely could adjust that. If I go into my little animation shelf up here at the top of Maya, with the hand selected, I can hit this button to create a motion path. Here's a tip for you. Because I'm switching from FK and IK, there was IK on the floor, goes back to FK in the air. FK and IK are two different sets of controls, which means if you try to track them, you can see that my IK control goes away. So let me select that motion trail and get rid of it. When you're trying to track hands specifically, it's usually smarter to track a finger because the fingers are not FK, IK specific. They'll be there either way. So you can see here, the arc of the hand could be better, could definitely make that cleaner. It's a little bit pointy here on 95. And so there's still work to be done and still more adjustments to be made. But hopefully now you can see that this is a process of layering things in as we go, focusing on the big stuff first so that the overall idea is coming through. And then you can always work on those smaller details as we go. If I were to have done the hand first and started with that, everything I would have done with the body would have gotten rid of all that work. And so this is the point of a layered workflow. You can start to see the shot coming together sooner. Working in spline allows us to preview our motion as we go. And it gives you a really good sense of the timing and the spacing of your work while you're working on it. Now, if this is your first time using a layered workflow and you want some more practice on top of what we've done in class, I'd recommend doing small assignments, really easy to finish, manageable things like a weight shift, a character just standing on one leg and then stepping onto the other leg. Little things like that where you can focus on the hip motion and then you can focus on foot contacts. Those are usually the best places to start, the hips and the feet. And if you're doing this with an acting shot, focus on just this part of the body, just the main kind of bust of your character, and deal with the head rotation and any major changes in the face to start off with, and start to layer the little stuff as you go.